Mr. Berry, you wrote the EEOC has defended DEI initiatives in the workplace even when those initiatives create the very Title VII violations that the EEOC is entrusted to stamp out. Expand on that, please.
Certainly. So the Commission has taken the position we've seen a couple times today, which is to equivocate between the existence of disparities and actual intentional discrimination. And repeatedly, over and over again, the Commission has declined to take action against companies that are saying the quiet part out loud. They are saying, we are going to have, come hell or high water, greater percentages of certain racial categories reflected, not because we've done a labor market analysis, but because we think that a certain kind of racial balancing is appropriate.
The U.S. Equal Opportunity Employment Commission has decided on April 29, 2024, that its new sexual harassment guidance that most businesses with 15 or more employees must allow men and women's bathrooms or be in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Attorney General Raskin, it's sure good to see you again.
You too.
What punishment would be meted out to a business that does not allow men into women's bathrooms?
Under that guidance?
Yes.
Well, it could range from, first of all, there's the embarrassment factor of going through the process. There's the financial cost of going through a process if the EEOC was to bring charges. And, depending on the circumstances, there could be fines.
Now, would the same punishment apply to a business if a business refused to force its employees to use pronouns they're not comfortable with?
Well, what we've said in the opinion in Indiana is that there's no federal or state law that has this requirement. So what your question goes to is how far these unelected bureaucrats are going to go to try to use the law and the wedge they're putting into it and the liberties they're taking with it to inflict harm and confusion on the business community.
Single-sex spaces in businesses with employees 15 or more exist if the sexual harassment guidance stays in place. Will they exist?
I'm having trouble following that one, but if you could.
It'd be very hard, wouldn't it, to be in compliance?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Mr. Berry, this EEO1 data, can you give me a little bit more information on how this data could be utilized and is actually in violation? Address our concerns that it's in violation of the law?
So the EEO1 collection requires employers to classify their employees on the basis of race, put people in these identity politics categories. The issue here is that unless there is particularized evidence of suspicion of discrimination, the EEO1 aggravates, raises unnecessarily the salience of race. And this is in direct contravention to what the first Justice Harlan said. In Plessy versus Ferguson, his dissent vindicated in Brown versus Board of Education, Justice Harlan said, quote, "We should not permit any public authority to know the race of," unquote, "any American citizen." That colorblindness is exactly what our Constitution requires, and that is indeed the value we ought to be upholding.
Isn't that the whole premise of the lady justice? She's blindfolded, she holds a set of scales and a sword. Isn't that the same kind of principle?
Exactly. No respecter of persons.
Well, pretty interesting.
Representative Paul Gosar makes a pretty telling jump there from fighting racial diversity in the workplace all the way to fighting rights for trans and other gender nonconforming people.
So why is the GOP sitting here spending committee resources trying to tell us that this is just some made-up agenda? Why are they bringing folks here to perpetrate these lies and attacks on people that we know have faced systemic discrimination for generations here in this country? It's because it's being funded. It's being funded by donors. It's being funded by organizations that are trying to advance this agenda. And it's being funded and supported by candidates right here in this Congress, as well as other institutions. Now, Mr. Berry, I appreciate that you've come before this committee, but I want to ask you just a few quick yes or no questions. Is it true that you clerked for Justice Alito, yes or no?
Yes.
And you helped to draft Chapter 18 of the Project 2025 report, correct?
I was the lead author, yes.
You were the lead author. And your law firm, in fact, filed an amicus in the Students for Fair Admission case before the Supreme Court, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. That's right. So one of our key witnesses that's been called here today, and again, no disrespect, but is part of a larger effort in front of the courts, in front of Congress, in front of state legislatures across the country to undermine and chip away at the rights of Americans. Affirmative action, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, women's rights, fueling anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation across the country, and making it less safe and less free for our children, for our families, and for all Americans.
Attacks on transgender people have bled over from the right and are infiltrating more and more mainstream media and center-left spaces. And that's not by coincidence. Transgender people are currently considered an easy and safe target. They are a relatively small segment of the population who have been demonized to such an extent that people think nothing of dehumanizing them and regularly use them to score political points. You can launch wild conspiratorial attacks against trans people, or cis people that you think pretending are trans helps your point somehow, and it's unlikely that you'll suffer any serious consequences. It might even raise your profile with the right wing. And many of the same arguments that are currently being used to target trans people were once used to target black people. And the right is eager to use people's fear of trans people to strip away civil rights way more broadly.
Ms. Wiley, I seem to recall that there were a series of federal circuit court decisions finding that Title VII protects transgender individuals against employment discrimination under the Civil Rights Act itself. Is that right?
That is correct, Congressman.
Okay, and that's well accepted at this point, right?
It is, and in fact, it's the 11th Circuit, which is a pretty conservative one that has been protecting transgender rights. Most recently, Tyler Copeland, who is as a corrections officer, a trans man, who experienced incredible harassment that also endangered him as an employee.
And I actually, I'm pleasantly surprised. I've not heard any of the witnesses, anyone really attacking the idea that that there should be civil rights protection for transgender people in the workplace. Instead, they seem to be attacking these kind of bathroom hysteria stories. And I wonder to what extent bathrooms have played a role generally in opposition to civil rights laws, going all the way back to an interracial workforce.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has been so sad about the discussion we've had today is that we haven't recognized that we heard a lot of these same arguments when we were talking about integrating based on race. You know, every time we have advancements in society for protecting rights, there's often a lot of fear about what it means. And that's true of public accommodations law, and saying that we should be able to have integrated restaurants and other public spaces. And that is something we overcame, not because the American public and a majority of white people at the time supported it, but because it was the right thing to do under our Constitution. And what we have seen is that when we protect people's rights, and bathrooms are a great example. No, everyone should be safe in a bathroom. There are women who get raped by cis men who are in men's clothing in bathrooms. They should be safe from that. Just like transgender women should be safe from sexual violence, everyone should be safe. And what we know is if you're a transgender woman forced to go into a men's bathroom, you are much less likely to be safe.
Mr. Berry was engaged in a colloquy with Representative Gosar about color blindness, which they anchored in the principle of Lady Justice being blindfolded. And it made me wonder about to what extent you think there will be objective, neutral, dispassionate interpretation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 by Justice Alito, Mr. Berry's former boss, whose home displayed the pro-January 6th insurrectionist upside-down American flag, and who displayed other flags in opposition to the American flag, essentially. Do you have a lot of confidence that Lady Justice is blindfolded when it comes to Justice Alito?
I do not.
And finally, just back on the transgender point, there seemed to be some suggestion from our colleagues that transgender individuals pose a threat of rape to American women. Are most American women who are raped by heterosexual men or by heterosexual cis men or by heterosexual transgender men?
Well, I will say that what I have seen, which is the letter in support of transgender people being able to utilize the bathroom that matches their identity, from sexual violence providers, rape crisis counselors, is it is transgender people who are more likely, who are often disproportionately victims of sexual violence, and that they have not seen any increase in sexual violence because of protecting the rights of transgender people.
I appreciate that. I'm out of time, but I'll say without fear of being contradicted that the overwhelming majority, if not all of the rapes in America, are conducted by men who are heterosexual cis men. And this other thing is complete paranoid conspiracy theory mythology meant to undermine the progress of civil rights law. I yield back.
People like Jonathan Berry know that they can't just come out and talk about Project 2025's real aims because they're so wildly out of step with what most American people consider acceptable. But what they can do in hearings like that is bring up things like locker rooms and bathrooms. And when they do, evidence has no place in discussions like this. If evidence was how we made decisions in America, we wouldn't be having these disgusting and dehumanizing arguments in the first place. Did you know that over 26% of transgender boys and 18% of transgender girls report being sexually assaulted, and that trans youth are even more likely to experience sexual assault if their restroom or locker room use is restricted? It's a wild situation and doesn't often get talked about in this situation. In 2022, research published by the American Medical Association found that, quote, transgender and non-binary adolescents are twice as likely to experience sexual violence as their cisgendered peers, but are less likely to attempt rape or commit sexual assault. How often do you hear this conversation framed in that way? Over half of transgender adults are sexually abused or assaulted by somebody over the course of their lives. The majority of trans people are living with serious, understandable trauma, and yet here we are debating whether they should be allowed to take up space at all. Their trauma is in no way prioritized in the same way that our convenience is.